Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Compasa. As you can see, there has been a lot of updates. Well, not a lot, perhaps, but I've gotten a new chair and a streaming microphone, I guess, to sort of improve the sound quality and stuff like that. And now my lips actually, to 100%, are going to sync with the video. So, I've been away for a while due to work and a lot of other things, but hopefully we can start streaming regularly or uploading videos regularly. And streaming wouldn't be a bad thing to do either. Um, but there has been elections in Turkey. There has been the claims of Kiev shooting down a Kinzal missile, ironically, which the Ukraine defense minister has denied. But we're going to go through that. The Financial Times claimed that Russia's oil exports are on all-time high, and there has been trouble in Sudan as of late. So I think we can go through the elections in Turkey. Uh, Mr. Erdogan, or President Erdogan, has won the vote with around, or won the presidential election with around 49 point something percent. Um, Western media outlets wanted him to go badly, desperately, because they're kind of tired of Turkey's independent foreign policy. But Turkey is a very powerful player, and we're gonna talk about that right now. But it's also a very, how should I say, its independent foreign policy is extremely annoying, may I say, in those terms, because it shifts back and forth between the interests of NATO and the United States, as we saw in, for example, Syria. And at times it's, you know, on par with Russia and China and so forth. So it's kind of like this exhausting policies that Erdogan is throwing back and forth, right? But why is Turkey such an important player? Well, first of all, it established itself as a negotiator in the recently, that is to say, in the grain deal, when having facilitated that between Russia and Ukraine, and it was obviously a big contributing player in the Syrian civil war. Although that didn't work out in the favor of Turkey. And one of the reasons many people speculate why Erdogan is angry at NATO and the United States is because of their, the constant red lines that they threatened Bashar al-Assad with, and that they never basically carried out. But one of the reasons why they didn't, or the main major reason why they did it, is because the Russians intervened, and you don't want a World War III, or you want to avoid it as much as possible, at least direct confrontation between two superpowers. But then you also have the U.S. support for the YPG, and which is basically their PKK offshoot in Syria. That does not sit well with Turkey, since Turkey has had a pretty long time conflict with the Kurdish minority, or specifically the PKK, inside of Turkey, so for quite some time. But historically speaking, yes, Turkey has been a strong partner of the United States. It's the second largest, I believe, army in NATO. It's a very powerful army, so they have a lot of sway. Um, and it's also a transit hub for when it comes to energy, food, and logistics. Um, so it receives a lot of huge cash transfers and privileges and dividends in that sense. But Turkey is it's like I said, its foreign policy is not liked these days by the West during the refugee crisis in 2015 and 16 and so forth. I mean, Turkey sort of threatened Europe a few times with, releasing this human wave of migrants to Europe. So uh, they've had a pretty up and down relationship. You know what I mean? The opinion or the tide in Turkey is not exactly very pro-Western these days. I remember when I was a kid, we would constantly hear about how the Turks wanted so badly want to join the European Union, and a lot of people in the media was criticizing that because, yeah, Turkey is culturally not European or whatever that means. I mean, they don't even consider Russia culturally European, despite that Russia is you know some will claim that its history is actually very Western, right? I would argue that, like many Russian philosophers, such as, for example, Dugin, that Russia is a Eurasian civilization. That is to say, it has a lot of European, uh, you know, cultural roots and so forth, but it has also been influenced a lot by Eastern and North Asian cultural influences, especially with the influx of the Mongol invasion. But that's a whole different topic. But what I'm trying to say is that, yeah, when they say European values, they usually refer to, let's just keep it very PG friendly here, but very, very degenerate liberal lifestyles, so to speak. Um, and as far as I know, Russian Turkish relations, I mean, the Turks want to preserve it, obviously. I mean, for now at least, they have a good relationship, but its relationship has been rocky, as I've said before. During the Soviet Union, Turkey was not exactly a friend of the Soviet Union, um, and vice versa, right? And today, I mean, as of recently, I mean, in 2015, Turkish-backed, insurgent groups in Syria shot down a Su-24 fighter jet, and the Russian ambassador in 2016, I believe, um, was murdered in Turkey. So the relationship with Turkey has always between Russia and Turkey have been not as stable all the time. It's been up and down. Um, but as of recent, a lot of American allies have been extremely fatigued with the way the United States, how should I say, extorts nations. How they, and especially after the money, the reserve currency siege that these countries attempted to do on Russia, where they tried to steal $300 million dollars that was the Russian dollar reserve, basically. Now they claim that they can't find this money for some reason, which I find quite hilarious. I mean, $300 million is not pennies exactly. But anyway, I think that was one of the things that sort of scared, for example, Saudi Arabia, India, Turkey, and so forth, because these countries have traditionally have had pretty good relationships with the West, and even pretty much done its bidding in their respective regions. Um, so that's how that is. But we will see how Russian and Turkish relations will go. I think they will stabilize even more. I think that eventually, though, that Erdogan and Turkey in general have to make a choice where either they're gonna be, with the West or with the BRICS countries, basically, or the Eurasian camp, so to speak. Um, and one more thing that I also forgot was obviously Turkey's beef with. Oh yeah, it says here. Sorry, Ambassador Andrei Karlov was murdered in Ankara in 2016. There you go. Now we got that under the way. But yeah, Turkey is still reluctant to accept Sweden in NATO. That's also one of the reasons why they don't like Erdogan, right? They think that Erdogan is, yeah, he's basically playing too much on both sides of the fence, if I say that. You had the whole Quran burning in desecrating the Quran here in Sweden by this I don't know, homosexual Zionists, and he did it outside the Turkish embassy, if I remember it correctly. And then you have the harboring of what Turkey calls terrorists. It accuses Sweden of harboring Kurdish and some Turkish anti-government groups and individuals. Then they are right in that regard. There are a lot of Kurdish people in Sweden that have that have some sort of connection with the PKK or the uh, with the YPG and so forth. And yeah, they spread a lot of propaganda and stuff like that, and they aim to secede a Kurdistan from Turkey, basically. I'm not saying that everybody, obviously, far away. I can't, this isn't true, but uh, there are quite a few individuals and organizations in Sweden that that does these things. Absolutely. And one more thing that I would like to say, but yes, Sweden is, how should I say, without being too inflammatory, in my opinion, if we just exclude the Kurdish Turkish beef, I would say Sweden and England and all these countries in the West, they pretty much do facilitate a lot of extremist people in general, whether they be ethno nationalists, Islamists, uh, you know, uh, even like white supremacists. I mean, Sweden, like the city of Gothenburg, produced like 300, uh, ISIS fighters and jihadists who went down to Iraq and Syria to fight. And this country harbors these type of people under the guise of the freedom of speech and democracy and the freedom to practice, like, not your religion per se, but like your right to start a fraternity of some sort. um, Obviously these people, they have somewhat of an eye on them, but yeah, I wouldn't say it's the best the best eye, so to speak, because yeah, terrorist attacks happen from time and time again, and I would say it's usually by Islamists or white supremacists, either as individuals or claimed organizations. So that's how that is, and we still haven't seen the blowback 100% yet from the Ukraine conflict, but there has been, and we've reported this before, there was a seizure or a bust sometime in Italy, I think by the end of 2022, where they had, where the Italian police had made a warrant search, and they busted some sort of, pro-fascist, pro-Azov battalion type league. Uh, It was a news article not a few months ago that showed that in Finland, criminal gangs, I think it was in particular biker gangs, use guns from Ukraine, because a lot of these guns that the West sends to Ukraine and the ammunition and so forth is actually being sold on the black market. And this was something, a hot topic that was avoided to a certain extent, but some media outlets were actually warning that this would be the case. And some of these weapons can end up in very dangerous hands. I don't know, perhaps, let's say, a drug dealer, Gonzalo Lira, who has been arrested by the SBU for the second time. He actually talked about one example. Let's say a drug dealer buys a Stinger missile and he wants to kill his opponent that's 10,000 feet up in the sky in a civilian passenger jet. And considering the impulsive behavior of a lot of criminals, yeah, they can definitely shoot down this plane. So, the blowback hasn't been shown to 100% yet, but we're getting a little bit of taste of that. So that's how that is. But yeah, Turkey is definitely an important player in the world. It cannot be ignored, and we should all keep a close eye on how. Sorry about that. How the situation unfolds in the country, and how its relations with Russia and the West will look like in the future. Now, I thought we can, let's see here, talk about what's going on in Ukraine. In the beginning of May, there was a lot of media reports that, well, it was probably last week. What am I saying? Beginning, we're in May. And last week that Ukraine had shot down a Kinzal hypersonic missile, which I didn't personally believe, but we have to be open-minded. However, and the Western media ran with this, right? But even like the Kiev Independent says that Ukraine's Air Force denies ballistic missile shot down over Kiev on May 4th. Air Force spokesperson Yuri Ihnat told Suspilin media outlet on May 5th that ballistic missiles were not shot down or even detected over Kiev's airspace on May 4th. Although there was a possibility of their use, no ballistic missiles were recorded, Ihnat said. Ihnat's denial came after the publication Defense Express alleged on May 5th that a Kh-47 Kinzal ballistic missile could have been successfully shot down by Ukrainian air defense overnight on May 4th. If true, this would be the first time such a missile was successfully shot down by Ukraine's air defense. Defense Express published photos provided by its sources showing that they judged to be the nose of the missile. Ukraine received Patriot air defense systems at the end of April, which are viewed as one of the world's best air defense systems, and will enable Ukraine to shoot down ballistic missiles. So even the Ukrainians are denying this. However, even in Swedish media, I remember that they talked about, the Ukrainians shot down Putin's secret deadly weapon or some crap like that. And Peskov, oh shit, I think I closed it down. Let's see. Let's see if I find it. There we go. Sorry about that. Yes, and presidential spokesperson Dmitry Peskov questioned whether Kiev had intercepted high-level Russian weaponry. So this is from the Russian side. It is highly unlikely that Ukraine shot down Russian hypersonic Kinzal missiles, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov has said. His comments came after Kiev claimed to have intercepted 6 of the rockets overnight. Speaking to reporters on Tuesday, Peskov said that Kinzal has absolutely unique characteristics. When asked about the details of the overnight Russian airstrikes on Kiev, the official referred reporters to the defense ministry. Earlier on Tuesday, Russian military officials said that a precision strike by a Kinzal missile had destroyed a U.S. supplied Patriot defense system in Kiev. The statement marks the first time that Moscow has reported the destruction of an air defense system supplied to Ukraine by its Western backers. I'm not going to go through the whole article, but the Russians questioned this, but I wanted you to specifically get the Ukrainian side of things because, yeah, the Russians could be considered as you know not neutral in that sense. Um, we can perhaps let's see. We can perhaps go over to the African continent. Uh, South Africa is saying that African leaders can mediate in Ukraine conflict, and I spoke about Turkey being a it has positioned itself as a how should I say, as a mediator in this conflict, and it is, you know, made it a power to be reckoned with in that sense. You have to understand that not everything is, military power. Soft powers is also very important. And one of the things that, for example, Russia and China has had a problem with, if you ask me, and a lot of other analysts, is that they've had a problem with media soft power projection, or, yeah, that type of propaganda. The United States, especially, have always been good with this type of tool because, they have Hollywood. They know how to make great movies. I'm not saying that Russians or the Chinese can't make great movies, but let's just keep 100. Hollywood formed a lot of our childhoods, formed a lot of our youth. American pop music or popular music, so to speak, because I don't really listen to pop music. I listen to I'm a rapper. I listen to underground hip hop. That's what I do. But that type of music, for good and bad, have obviously influenced us. I would say mostly bad, due to its destructive nature, right? But there's obviously good hip hop that talks about politics and class struggle and imperialism and stuff like that. It's not really pushed as much though by the media and the powers that be. But yes, if African leaders, and I believe that this RT article said that Ramaphosa here, his statement talked about. He said that the leaders of Senegal, Uganda, and Egypt had agreed to participate in the initiative to act as peace mediators. This would obviously, give them a good projection out there that these countries can be reliable as, some sort of leaders to mediate in different wars and conflicts that goes on across the world. And that is actually a good status to have. China has also done this in the Middle East, for example. They, negotiated a peace deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran, or maybe not a peace deal, but a normalization between ties between these countries that have been pretty much beefing since the 80s, right? Um, then you have, you know, the what do you call it? The integration of Syria back into the Arab League again. We're going to see how the Russians will succeed in negotiating peace between, or some sort of normalization of ties between Turkey and Syria, but that looks pretty promising, right? Um, so the U.S. and the European Union have lost its its status or its influence a lot in many parts of the world. And I hope these African leaders from these respective countries can act as negotiators and mediate in this conflict. And I hope that their status as reliable diplomatic powers will increase. I think that's a good thing for them. And now I think we can wrap up the video with the conflict in Sudan. So, what is going on in Sudan? There is a conflict between General Burhan and Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, who is the leader of the or the general of the feared RSF force, that was also known as the Janjaweed. And the Janjaweed has its roots in Sudan's western parts, that is to say Darfur, a region that has never really succeeded in sort of fully integrate into the country. It used to be an independent sultanate up until I think 1816 or something like that, before it got integrated into the greater Sudan. And Darfur pretty much means the land of the Furs, because Dar means land in Arabic, and Fur as Fur people or Furwa people are the I think the biggest ethnic group in Darfur. But there's obviously Arabs, there are Masalit, Sakawa people, and probably some other ethnicities that live there, and Masalit people as well. There have recently been attacks on Masalit people by Arab militias in Darfur. But this man, Dagalo, he was born in 1974 or 1975. It's not really clear how yet, because there weren't any official birth records kept in this part of Sudan, as far as I know. But he was from the Mahariya tribe of the Rizi Igat community in Darfur, and they are camel herders, known as Aballa Arabs, and they reside mostly in northern Darfur. And a lot of these Aballa people or Aballa Arabs, camel herders, they joined the Janjaweed because they were very disenfranchised. And yeah, Dagalo was one of them. He joined the Janjaweed. It's Arab tribal militias. Mostly, as I said here, is in the Al Jazeera article says as well, from camel trading tribes active in Darfur and parts of Chad. You see, in Darfur, there are two types of Arabs, right? You have the Bagara Arabs, which, they deal with cattle, cows and stuff like that. And you have in the north the Aballa Arabs, which were given the worst dar or lands by the Sultanate of Darfur, at least what Alex Deval claims in his book, Darfur. And as far as I know, the conflict in Darfur started because of practically drought, right? So there was a huge conflict between sedentary African tribes and Arab nomadic tribes, and yeah, that's how it started. And this conflict goes way back. I mean, we could make a whole separate video about it. It's a very interesting conflict. I wrote a whole piece about it when I was 15, and yes, there is a lot of racism involved in this conflict. Obviously, the Janjaweed is influenced by the Quraishi ideology, as it's called, where they want to pretty much. They're not going to be able to succeed with it though, but they want to basically completely ethnically cleanse Darfur out of non-Arabs. And as far as I know, back in the 80s, they were ideologically backed up by a group called, by the end of the 80s, called Tajamu al-Arabi, which promoted this Quraishi ideology. And they released a letter where they talked about that the Arabs are a majority in Darfur and that they deserve a lot more power in this part of Sudan. And there was a whole bunch of other racist nonsense where they talked about, that the people in Khartoum who hold power aren't real ethnic Arabs, and they're a strange hybrid people of Arabs, Egyptians, and Nubians, and whatever. It's like a lot of crazy stuff, right? But this is where Dagalo comes from, and as far as I know, he became a very he rose through the ranks of the Janjaweed when he started fighting against revolting non-Arab tribes in Darfur in 2003, and he was also given a bunch of gold mines, and he became a very rich businessman. So he became also an ally of then President al-Bashir, Omar al-Bashir. So in 2013, the RSF was formed under the leadership of Dagalo. It combined elements of the Janjaweed into a new force under the auspices of al-Bashir and his national intelligence and security services. But obviously they would turn against him later on and challenge al-Bashir's legitimacy. And yeah, he was eventually deposed, so to speak. And Sudan has been ruled by a military council ever since. But this RSF force is not to be played with. I mean, they have between 70,000 to 100,000 fighters. That's under the rule of Dagalo, of General Dagalo. And some people talked about, that this has its roots in the government of Sudan, or the transitional government, or the military council, wanting to, or allowing Russia to set up a military base in the country. I think this is partially true. I think the United States want to keep these parties at each other's throats. However, one must remember that military rule in Sudan is nothing new. I mean, most of its leaders have been from the army, and military coups are extremely, unfortunately, very common in the country. But you have to also remember that both of these gentlemen actually were okay with Russia building their base there. However, this base cannot be built until a civilian government takes place and pretty much, I think, ratify the decision and put it in action, so to speak. The one thing that Dagalo doesn't want to do is to integrate into the Sudanese army, and yeah, he will pretty much lose parts of his power, I guess, political power, and he doesn't want to do that. So yeah. I'm sorry. I want to also add that Dagalo expanded, his business, and his family expanded his business not just through gold mining, but also livestock and infrastructure. And according to the Guardian, he also sold paramilitary services to different countries in Africa and the Middle East to fight different wars. So that's why you, for example, have seen a lot of Sudanese mercenaries fighting in Yemen against the Ansarullah, or the Houthi movement that exists over there. So that's also one of the ways he has supported himself or made a lot of money. But yeah, that's pretty much the background of the conflict, the current power conflict that's going on in the Sudan. And you partially got a little bit of an analysis of about the war in Darfur. So with that, I think we can wrap up this video, and it feels good to be back, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you like the new setup. I hope the sound is nice. If you like my content, please hit the subscribe button, share this video, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any uploads. And you know what? I'll see you in the next one. Thank you very much. Stay blessed.